All right, hello and welcome back. My name is Robert, and today I'm going to start walking through the CompTIA Pentest Plus path on Tryhackme. The platform has changed quite a bit since I last used it. If we check out my yearly activity, again, I haven't used this since September of 2024 about. So I might fumble through some of this. I'm going to reset the room and work through it, but have some patience with me as we get going. We're going to jump into Path, CompTIA Pentest Plus, planning and scoping, and we'll probably work through, I'll probably do a video for each room just to keep them separate and keep them short. We'll jump into our options, reset the progress. Yes, reset my progress. And there we go, room's cleared. One of the things I'll do in a later video is set up Obsidian, which is a note-taking application that I haven't used in the past, but I thought that might make for a good video too. I've mostly used OneNote in the past, so a lot of people have spoken highly about Obsidian. I'm going to check it out. Anyway, let's jump into task one. Keep this video short and concise. And I'm going to have this read by an AI dialogue reader to be easier on your ears. So let's kick that off.
Before teaching you the technical hands-on aspects of ethical hacking, you'll need to understand more about what a penetration tester's job responsibilities are and what processes are followed in performing pen tests, finding vulnerabilities in a client's application or system. The importance and relevancy of cybersecurity are ever increasing and can be in every walk of life. News headlines fill our screens, reporting yet another hack or data leak. Cybersecurity is relevant to all people in the modern world, including a strong password policy to protect your emails, or to businesses and other organizations needing to protect both devices and data from damages. A penetration test or pen test is an ethically driven attempt to test and analyze the security defenses to protect these assets and pieces of information. A penetration test involves using the same tools, techniques, and methodologies that someone with malicious intent would use, and is similar to an audit. According to Security Magazine, a cybersecurity industry magazine, there are over 2,200 cyber attacks every day, one attack every 39 seconds.
Okay, so to complete this section, all we need to do is click the checkbox, and I've started my first streak in a long time. Moving on to task 2.
Penetration testing ethics. The battle of legality and ethics in cybersecurity, let alone penetration testing, is always controversial. Labels like hacking and hacker often hold negative connotations, especially in pop culture, thanks to a few bad apples. The idea of legally gaining access to a computer system is a challenging concept to grasp. After all, what makes it legal exactly? Recall that a penetration test is an authorized audit of a computer system's security and defenses as agreed by the owners of the systems. The legality of penetration is pretty clear-cut in this sense. Anything that falls outside of this agreement is deemed unauthorized. Before a penetration test starts, a formal discussion occurs between the penetration tester and the system owner. Various tools, techniques, and systems to be tested are agreed on. This discussion forms the scope of the penetration testing agreement and will determine the course the penetration test takes. Companies that provide penetration testing services are held against legal frameworks and industry accreditation. For example, the National Cybersecurity Center, NCSC, has the Czech accreditation scheme in the UK. This check means that only Czech-approved companies can conduct authorized penetration tests of public sector and CNI systems and networks. NCSC. Ethics is the moral debate between right and wrong. Where an action may be legal, it may go against an individual's belief system of right and wrong. Penetration testers will often be faced with potentially morally questionable decisions during a penetration test. For example, they are gaining access to a database and being presented with potentially sensitive data. Or they are perhaps performing a phishing attack on an employee to test an organization's human security. If that action has been agreed upon during the initial stages, it is legal, however ethically questionable. Hackers are sorted into 3 hats, where their ethics and motivations behind their actions determine what hat category they are placed into. Let's cover these 3 in the table below. White hat. These hackers are considered the good people. They remain within the law and use their skills to benefit others. For example, a penetration tester performing an authorized engagement on a company. Gray hat. These people use their skills to benefit others often. However, they do not respect/follow the law or ethical standards at all times. For example, someone taking down a scamming site. Black hat. These people are criminals and often seek to damage organizations or gain some form of financial benefit at the cost of others. For example, ransomware authors infect devices with malicious code and hold data for ransom. Rules of Engagement, ROE. The ROE is a document that is created at the initial stages of a penetration testing engagement. This document consists of 3 main sections, explained in the table below, which are ultimately responsible for deciding how the engagement is carried out. The SANS Institute has a great example of this document, which you can view online here. Permission. This section of the document gives explicit permission for the engagement to be carried out. This permission is essential to legally protect individuals and organizations for the activities they carry out. Test scope. This section of the document will annotate specific targets to which the engagement should apply. For example, the penetration test may only apply to certain servers or applications, but not the entire network. Rules. The rules section will define exactly the techniques that are permitted during the engagement. For example, the rules may specifically state that techniques such as phishing attacks are prohibited, but MITM, man-in-the-middle attacks, are okay.
All right, so now we're at the questions. You are given permission to perform a security audit on an organization. What type of hacker would you be? So we have permission. We would be a white hat. And there was a tip here. I could have clicked this with the categories in the task. Okay, interesting how that worked. I wanted to see. So it pops up a little dialogue at the bottom left of the screen. Got that one correct. You attack an organization and steal their data. What type of hacker would you be? This would be a black hat. And then finally, what document defines how penetration testing engagements should be carried out? And this would be rules of engagement, the ROE. All right, we are done with that section. Let's move on to task 3.
Penetration testing methodologies. Penetration tests can have a wide variety of objectives and targets within scope. Because of this, no penetration test is the same, and there are no one-case-fits-all as to how a penetration tester should approach it. The steps a penetration tester takes during an engagement is known as the methodology. A practical methodology is a smart one, where the steps taken are relevant to the situation at hand. For example, having a methodology that you would use to test the security of a web application is not practical when you have to test the security of a network. Before discussing some different industry standard methodologies, we should note that all of them have a general theme of the following stages. Information gathering. This stage involves collecting as much publicly accessible information about a target organization as possible, for example, OSINT and research. Note, this does not involve scanning any systems. Enumeration scanning. This stage involves discovering applications and services running on the systems. For example, finding a web server that may be potentially vulnerable. Exploitation. This stage involves leveraging vulnerabilities discovered on a system or application. This stage can involve the use of public exploits or exploiting application logic. Privilege escalation. Once you have successfully exploited a system or application, known as a foothold, this stage is the attempt to expand your access to a system. You can escalate horizontally and vertically, where horizontally is accessing another account of the same permission group, i.e. another user, whereas vertically is that of another permission group, i.e. an administrator. Post-exploitation. This stage involves a few substages. 1. What other hosts can be targeted, pivoting. 2. What additional information can we gather from the host now that we are a privileged user? 3. Covering your tracks. 4. Reporting. OSSTM. The Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual provides a detailed framework of testing strategies for systems, software, applications, communications, and the human aspect of cybersecurity. The methodology focuses primarily on how these systems, applications communicate, so it includes a methodology for telecommunications, phones, VoIP, etc., wired networks, wireless communications, advantages and disadvantages. Advantage covers various testing strategies in depth. Disadvantage. The framework is difficult to understand, very detailed, and tends to use unique definitions. Advantage includes testing strategies for specific targets, i.e., telecommunications and networking. Disadvantage intentionally left blank. Advantage. The framework is flexible depending upon the organization's needs. Disadvantage intentionally left blank. Advantage. The framework is meant to set a standard for systems and applications, meaning that a universal methodology can be used in a penetration testing scenario. Disadvantage, intentionally left blank. OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project framework, is a community-driven and frequently updated framework used solely to test the security of web applications and services. The Foundation regularly writes reports stating the top 10 security vulnerabilities a web application may have, the testing approach, and remediation. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantage. Easy to pick up and understand. Disadvantage. It may not be clear what type of vulnerability a web application has. They can often overlap. Advantage. Actively maintained and is frequently updated. Disadvantage. OWASP does not make suggestions to any specific software development life cycles. Advantage. It covers all stages of an engagement, from testing to reporting and remediation. Disadvantage. The framework doesn't hold any accreditation such as check. Advantage. Specializes in web applications and services. Disadvantage intentionally left blank. NIST Cybersecurity Framework 1.1. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is a popular framework used to improve an organization's cybersecurity standards and manage the risk of cyber threats. This framework is a bit of an honorable mention because of its popularity and detail. The framework provides guidelines on security controls and benchmarks for success for organizations from critical infrastructure, power plants, etc., all through to commercial. There is a limited section on a standard guideline for the methodology a penetration tester should take. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantage. The NIST framework is estimated to be used by 50% of American organizations by 2020. Disadvantage. NIST has many iterations of frameworks, so it may be difficult to decide which one applies to your organization. Advantage. The framework is extremely detailed in setting standards to help organizations mitigate the threat posed by cyber threats. Disadvantage. The NIST framework has weak auditing policies, making it difficult to determine how a breach occurred. Advantage. The framework is very frequently updated. Disadvantage. The framework does not consider cloud computing, which is quickly becoming increasingly popular for organizations. Advantage NIST provides accreditation for organizations that use this framework. Advantage. The NIST framework is designed to be implemented alongside other frameworks. NCSC CAF, the Cyber Assessment Framework CAF, is an extensive framework of 14 principles used to assess the risk of various cyber threats and an organization's defenses against these. The framework applies to organizations considered to perform vitally important services and activities, such as critical infrastructure, banking, and the likes. The framework mainly focuses on and assesses the following topics: data security, system security, identity and access control, resiliency, monitoring, response and recovery planning, advantages and disadvantages. Advantage. This framework is backed by a government cybersecurity agency. Disadvantage. The framework is still new in the industry, meaning that organizations haven't had much time to make the necessary changes to be suitable for it. Advantage. This framework provides accreditation. Disadvantages. The framework is based on principles and ideas and isn't as direct as having rules like some other frameworks. Advantage: this framework covers 14 principles which range from security to response.
Okay, so I could have probably updated and removed some intentionally left blank above, but I guess I missed some of those. Anyway, moving on. Answer the questions below. What stage of penetration testing involves using publicly available information? And this is going to be information gathering. And we got that right. If you wanted to use a framework for pen testing telecommunications, what framework would you use? Note, we're looking for the acronym here and not the full name, because the full name would be, we scroll up, the Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual, OSSTMM. Go ahead and put that in, OSSTMM. Okay. And then finally, what framework focuses on the testing of web applications? And that's going to be OWASP. Moving on to task 4. We've got pictures of our black box, gray box, white box. And let's move in.
Black box, white box, gray box, penetration testing, black box, no knowledge, gray box, partial knowledge, white box, full knowledge. There are 3 primary scopes when testing an application or service. Your understanding of your target will determine the level of testing that you perform in your penetration testing engagement. In this task, we'll cover these 3 different scopes of testing. Black box testing. This testing process is a high-level process where the tester is not given any information about the inner workings of the application or service. The tester acts as a regular user, testing the functionality and interaction of the application or piece of software. This testing can involve interacting with the interface, i.e. buttons, and testing to see whether the intended result is returned. No knowledge of programming or understanding of the program is necessary for this type of testing. Black box testing significantly increases the amount of time spent during the information gathering and enumeration phase to understand the attack surface of the target. Gray box testing. This testing process is the most popular for things such as penetration testing. It is a combination of both black box and white box testing processes. The tester will have some limited knowledge of the internal components of the application or piece of software. Still, it will be interacting with the application as if it were a black box scenario, and then using their knowledge of the application to try and resolve issues as they find them. With gray box testing, the limited knowledge given saves time and is often chosen for extremely well-hardened attack surfaces. White box testing. This testing process is a low-level process usually done by a software developer who knows programming and application logic. The tester will be testing the internal components of the application or piece of software and, for example, ensuring that specific functions work correctly and within a reasonable amount of time. The tester will have full knowledge of the application and its expected behavior and is much more time-consuming than black box testing. The full knowledge in a white box testing scenario provides a testing approach that guarantees the entire attack surface can be validated.
All right, so questions for task 4. You are asked to test an application but are not given access to its source code. What testing process is this? This would be a black box test. You are asked to test a website and you are given access to the source code. What testing process is this? And this is going to be a white box. All right, so task 5.
Practical. Acme Penetration Test. Acme has approached you for an assignment. They want you to carry out the stages of a penetration test on their infrastructure. View the site by clicking the green button on this task and follow the guided instructions to complete this exercise.
Complete the penetration test engagement against Acme's infrastructure. So we have a split screen here with the rules of engagement. Let's go through the stages of a penetration test assignment for the Acme company. This stage of the penetration test is where you define the primary objectives. Cycle through the tabs below to explore these. Permission. For a penetration test to be ethical and legal, both parties, the company wanting to test their application for vulnerabilities and the company conducting the pen test, will sign a document giving clear permission for the intended actions. And here we have an email basically discussing the penetration test. Test scope. The test scope will define what targets or environments are being tested against. For example, the client may only want to test part of their application and not their entire network. Rules. The rules define the type of behavior a penetration tester will employ. For example, you may only have access to part of the application and not the entire server that hosts it. So, can't really interact with the email, but let's proceed. Next, information gathering. And here we have somebody's LinkedIn account. The information gathering stage of an engagement is often undervalued. This stage involves using publicly accessible channels to collect intel on your target. Abby, who has a public profile on LinkedIn, advertises that she works for Acme and even includes her email in her bio, which is a possible way we can target her work laptop and thus the company. You can see the email right there. Enumeration and scanning. The goal of this stage is to complete a picture of your target. A penetration tester will try to identify user accounts, machines on their network shares, applications, etc. Information gathering from stage 2 and the engagement scope document will help in enumerating your target. The enumeration phase is very important as your findings are used to exploit your target system. Stage 4. Let's pretend Abby from stage 2 made a post on LinkedIn sharing a blog post she wrote about Acme. From this post, you find Acme's web server IP 96.37.50.151. Try scanning it. So let's just copy that, throw that into there, and give it a scan. Starting vulnerability scan and service vulnerable, web yes, login no. Next, exploitation. The exploitation stage involves the knowledge from your enumeration to now identify and exploit vulnerabilities in any of their applications that are in scope. For example, we enumerated Acme's website in stage 3 and found it was vulnerable. We would now exploit this vulnerability, thus ethically hacking Acme's website. Exploitation is the use of a vulnerability discovered to gain unauthorized access to an information security system or data. Next, post-exploitation. The post-exploitation stage starts when you've gained unauthorized access to a system. At this stage of the engagement, your main goals will be to maintain access to the system and escalate your privileges within the system to a super user or administrator user. Systems are usually set up with normal users that don't have access to various sensitive files and functions. Gaining access to higher privilege users, such as administrators, will allow you to perform actions that you wouldn't be able to as a normal user, such as reading sensitive files and gaining access to all programs within the system. After doing this, you'll be extracting sensitive information from the system and attacking other components in this environment. E.g., if this system is part of a network, you will attempt to gain access to other machines in this network. Next. Pentest report and clearing up. This stage usually occurs at the end of a penetration test. As a penetration tester, you will have to explain the results of your engagement to the client. This is usually done in the form of a report that contains details regarding any security issues you've found and how to mitigate them. The client will use this report to understand the security issues and fix flaws. And fix flaws in the technology stack that was tested. I got sidetracked by the flag down here. It's also a best practice to clean up the environment you've been testing where possible. For example, if you were provided access to machines or tooling by the client, you need to delete any artifacts. That looks like a grammatical error there. You will need to delete any artifacts that have been created as a result of testing. So I think we want to grab this flag and throw that in as our answer. And that will be it. We have completed the penetration testing fundamentals room. So in the next video, I'll follow up with the next room in this path. Let's just go get what that is. Demonstrate your expertise. Don't need to do that. Can you reach day 3? And that is the next room, but I don't think that's where we want to go. Close. Let's exit split view and go back to, let's go back to our learn paths. I don't think it's taking me to the right place. Planning and scoping. Oh, okay. Red team engagement. So in the next video, I will pick up with red team engagements. I hope you enjoyed. Take care.